Cool. Well, I can tell this is going well, so let's move on. Welcome to the 202nd episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a nerd culture podcast that discusses nerddom through various segments. You can find us online at thenerdspodcast.com, facebook.com/thenerdpodcast. You can follow us on almost any social media at the Nerds Podcast. You can email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. I'm Tyler Hunt, and I'm here with my co-host, as always, Pat Attack. What's up, dude?
Not a whole lot. Just hanging out. I'm excited to be recording. My wife and I took kind of like a short day trip to your old stomping grounds, Bloomington, last night. So we kind of got back a little bit late. So I'm a little tired, but not too bad. And it was kind of interesting because the last time we went to Bloomington, you actually came, like it was the three of us that went, and school wasn't in session. So it was like a fucking ghost town. In school, I don't know if it's started up yet or if it's starting up next week or whatever, but there was a ton of people there, and so it felt more like an actual city.
Yeah, I want to say this was probably when like the freshmen were moving in, was this week. There's like a freshman welcome week. Yeah. If they still do that. Mine was 11 years ago at this point, so I don't know what it's like now, but yeah, that's probably it. I remember that weekend was insane, like just traffic-wise and just people everywhere. So I really enjoyed when we went that one time because you don't see downtown Bloomington as barren as we did when we went and saw Kevin Smith. So I'm assuming you went for a comedy show?
Yeah, we went to the Comedy Attic. A guy that my wife really likes, Justin Willman, was playing at the Comedy Attic for this whole weekend, and she's a big fan. It was her birthday present from me. I bought tickets a little bit ago, and I was actually surprised. I mean, I like him, but I'm not a big magic fan, and he's a magician, but he's kind of like a comic. He's a comic / magician, and I'm not quite sure how he defines himself, but it was actually really fun. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, the Comedy Attic, there's not really a bad seat in the house. I think we actually had better seats this time around than we did for Kevin Smith, but I didn't think we necessarily had bad seats for Kevin Smith by any means. And so there was actually a couple of openers, which I thought was kind of strange because they didn't do magic. It was all just stand-up. It was actually funny because it was guys that I've done shows with before. So that was kind of cool seeing those guys open for... I mean, it's hard for me to think of my shows as being legit shows. I mean, they are. I get paid a lot of times to do comedy, but it just feels different when you're at a legit comedy club and you see guys you've done shows with. You're like, ooh, these guys get to do actual shows, even though my shows are legit shows too. But it felt kind of strange. But yeah, I was surprised at how much stand up he actually did. Like, I thought it was just going to be all magic, but, I mean, he does a ton of stand-up, too. I think his crowd work was really cool, and then his tricks were fun. Like, he did this one trick where he had a guy, he basically just had, like, this, I don't know how to describe it, but it was just like this pocket protector thing, and it had, like, 6 slots, and each slot had, like, a little piece of paper written on both sides, and the one side that he was showing the guy just had numbers like 1 through 6. And he was like, you pick a number and on the other side is a prize and I'll give you the prize. And the guy picked I don't remember, like 3 or something like that. And so he turns the paper around and it says hug. And so as the guy's coming up to get his hug, he kind of like hugs the guy and like turns the pocket protectors around and all of the other ones say anal on him. And I thought that was pretty funny. Like, I didn't expect that kind of stuff. And so it was a lot more stand-up kind of stuff that I really appreciated. I mean, there was some really cool tricks. He did this one that he closed with that had like numbers that I wasn't that crazy about. It was kind of silly, but for the most part, I was really impressed with the magic and the stand-up quality of his show.
That's pretty cool, man. You should like in your set just have like one magic trick. Just oddly placed, and you just do normal stand-up, and then like in the middle of your set you do a magic trick, and then you just go back to stand-up, and nobody's sure what to make of it.
That'd be interesting. I thought you were going to go with, you should have an anal joke. And I'm like, you must not know me very well because I have like 3 anal jokes.
No, I was very well aware of that. Like, that's your bread and butter is the anal joke. So
my best anal joke you've actually already heard.
I'm trying to remember.
It was just like when we were off recording, just bullshitting one day. I said something to you and you got really uncomfortable. And I was like, well, that's like one of my favorite jokes that I do.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, that's pretty much that sums up my comedy is that I just like to make people uncomfortable. I'm going to be super famous.
Our friendship in a way.
All right, man. So let's kick this episode off. If you're new to this podcast, welcome. We break down the episodes by kind of just kind of doing it in segments. And the first segment, we just like kind of checking in with each other. We call it What We're Into. So what are you into this week?
I watched The Death of Superman, which is the newest DC animated movie that they put out. I think that it's been on VOD for a couple weeks now, but it came out on Blu-ray this week. I rented it on iTunes. The DC animated movies have had a pretty good track record, but over the last couple years, it's been more hit or miss than they once were. I wouldn't consider them as successful as they were probably 5 or 6 years ago. I've not been a big fan of the Teen Titan movies that they've put out over the last few years. And then you can listen to Pat and I review The Killing Joke if you go back a couple years into the podcast and hear how bad we thought that was. With all that being said, you could probably imagine I was pretty hesitant about this movie since the track record has definitely been thrown off. And since this is also a Superman story, who's a character that I've only recently started to kind of buy into and still have reservations about, I was even less excited. And honestly, to be perfectly transparent, like the only reason I really watched this was because I needed something to talk about on the podcast this week. I just had a busy week, so I needed to watch something, and this was a new thing. So obviously not super excited going into this movie, but I am actually happy to report that this movie knocked it out of the park. It's really well done, and it gets you invested into the content and what's happening with these characters despite it being a cartoon. So for those of you that don't know, this is based off of one of the more famous, I think, Superman runs that took place in the early 90s where Superman is killed by Doomsday. So it's an interpretation of that story, but a few pieces of it here and there are changed to kind of fit the mold with their more recent movies, so it can kind of fit into canon with these other DC extended universe movies that they've done. So that's kind of the setup, I guess, of this film. I talked about how I felt about Superman and just recently buying into the character a little bit more than I have in the past. And for Superman, him by himself is a pretty boring character, and there's a reason that he's kind of called the Boy Scout. There's not a ton of depth to his character, in my opinion. And considering that he's all powerful, there's not a lot of weight that's carried by his stories sometimes, in my opinion. He's got the personality of a boring farmer from Kansas because that's exactly what he is. So the aspect of this character that makes him interesting is his villains, the Justice League, and his personal relationships. And this movie really does succeed in representing all three of those. And as far as like his personal relationships go, his relationship with Lois Lane in this movie and the arc that they have is spectacular. You really care about what happens to Superman, not necessarily because of your love for the character, but because of what he means to Metropolis and those that are closest to him. Performance-wise with this movie, it's pretty much the same voice actors that they've used pretty consistently over the last 7 or 8 years. Jerry O'Connell plays Superman, Nathan Fillion plays Green Lantern, Rosario Dawson plays Wonder Woman, and then Rebecca Romijn plays Lois Lane, and so on and so forth. They all do a fine job. Jerry O'Connell specifically delivers a lot of great lines as both Clark Kent and Superman, and actually does a pretty good job. As far as the action goes, I expected it to be pretty hit or miss considering it's animated. Like typically the action in an animated movie isn't going to be anything spectacular, but I thought that it was really done well here. The last 45 minutes of this 90-minute movie are pretty much the fight with Doomsday. So, it starts out with the Justice League fighting Doomsday and then Superman coming in at the end. It's done incredibly well though. Like 45 minutes of animated action scenes, like a lot, but there are a lot of great character moments sprinkled throughout. And it's not just destruction porn. It's really just pushing the story forward. So I really appreciated that. The easiest comparison to make with this movie is to compare it to Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, since that movie ends with a very liberal take on the climax of this comic. This movie almost feels like an apology for that movie. It does everything the right way and tells an amazing emotional story, which that movie obviously lacked quite a bit. I looked just now actually, and this movie currently has an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, granted, that is based on 9 reviews, so, that's 8 out of 9 good reviews. But that 89%, in my opinion, is very well deserved. It's definitely restored my faith in the DC animated movies, and I'm legitimately pumped for whatever else is coming down the pike, because I thought this was a great take on a comic that, honestly, I could care less about.
Yeah, so we've been doing this podcast for like 5 years. So I obviously respect your opinion about things, and I have heard good things about this film. However, it wouldn't have mattered if you came out and said, like, this is the greatest film I've ever watched before in my entire life. There's no way I would fucking watch this movie. Like, I don't care. I really, like, I heard some good reviews previous to hearing you talk about this, and I was like, oh, maybe. And I was like, no, why? Why would I do that? I don't care about this character. Nothing about this movie is gonna make me like it. Like, I have zero faith that this movie could do anything to move the needle for me.
I mean, spoiler alert, he dies. So
yeah, well,
that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess I could get a kick out of that. No, I don't hate the character that much. I'm just not interested in it. And there's so much stuff out there. It's like, why waste my time on something that I know chances are I'm not going to enjoy.
Yeah, I've not read the comic actually, so I was surprised by how much Justice League is in it. So there is a lot of the characters that you maybe like a little bit more, like Batman and the Flash. But
sure.
I mean, I can't beat around the bush. At its core, it's a Superman story. So yeah, I mean, you're not hurting my feelings because you don't want to give it a go. I don't know that there's anything out there that could kind of change your feelings about the character because, like I said, at its core, he's a boring farm boy from Kansas who's all powerful. So that just doesn't play for everybody. So
for sure.
That being said, what are you into?
Well, leading into this week, I was pretty determined to make sure that I didn't talk about Madden 19, just because I've been covering it a lot on the YouTube channel. It came out on Tuesday. Well, the Hall of Fame edition came out on Tuesday, which I bought, so I got to play it on Tuesday. The base game came out on Friday, but this segment is called What We're Into, and I felt a little disingenuous if I talked about anything but Madden 19, because literally that's all I've been doing. Like, we went to Bloomington last night, so I didn't play this at all yesterday because I worked, and then we went straight there, so I didn't play it at all yesterday. But literally, that is all I've been doing, is working and playing Madden 19. So I felt like if I went and saw a movie or I watched something or whatever, it would just be an excuse so I didn't have to talk about this. And so again, I just felt a little disingenuous if I didn't talk about it. So I have given a full review on the YouTube channel. So I'll just kind of give this kind of the Cliff Notes version of that review, because that was like 25-minute long review of Madden 19. And I have been a Madden apologist for a while. Like, I see and understand why some people don't like to get the game every year. Like, I have a lot of people ask me, is it worth getting this year, or is it worth getting every year? And if you're going to ask me that question, then chances are it's probably not worth it for you. Like, that's kind of been my go-to answer from now on. It's like, if you're asking that question, then no, it's not worth it for you. But being somebody that plays it every year, I can appreciate some of the things that they add. It's not always perfect, and Madden 19 for sure isn't perfect, but it feels like this is the first game in a while that they didn't add a ton of new stuff, which is not bad, but they really spent a lot of time trying to clean some stuff up, and that's kind of what I'll talk about in this Cliff Notes version of my review. So the gameplay, I think, is really polished for the most part. I think it was like a couple of years ago they added different wide receiver catches, and I've talked a lot about that, about how it kind of makes it more of an immersive game, because you see that in the NFL all the time. Like, wide receivers are very rarely open. The quarterback just throws it to a spot and has the wide receiver make a play. And I really enjoyed that aspect when they added it a couple of years ago. And it feels like they're finally starting to do a little bit more for the cornerbacks, because if you did an aggressive catch with the wide receiver, even like last year, chances are you were going to come down with that ball, and there wasn't a whole lot you could do as a cornerback. And so I think the wide receiver cornerback battles feel a little bit more normal and real. So I appreciate that. They added something. This is the second year that they've had this game engine called Frostbite. They made it for Madden last year, and it feels like they're really starting to tap into the potential of that game engine. They added something called real player motion, which is supposed to make the gameplay just feel more real and really kind of help out the run game. And I struggled with it for a while, because I just have that muscle memory of, as soon as I get the ball, to hit the turbo. And that actually doesn't do the turbo anymore in this game. It does this little like one cut mechanic, and it's taking me a little bit to kind of get used to it. So yeah, I have to basically unlearn a lot of muscle memory from this game, but I was really struggling with the run game, and I just assumed it was because I wasn't good at this one mechanic, but it turns out, like, the more I thought about it, it's just because the block shedding is like broken in this game, and you have like a second before you get hit by like 3 guys. So I was really, really struggling with that. So I eventually just messed with the sliders and fixed it kind of on my own. But that's definitely something that hopefully in the title update here in a couple of days, I'm sure they'll come up with an update. Hopefully that'll fix that, because that was the biggest like thing that popped out at me when I first started playing this game, is the block shedding is really bad. I will say that they've added a couple of things here and there, most notably in Madden Ultimate Team. They have solo battles. I've talked about this before. I refuse to pay any money for Madden Ultimate Team to like open packs or anything like that. I just grind at Madden Ultimate Team, and if my team gets a ton better, then that's awesome. If not, I'm not going to spend any money on this. And it feels like, and maybe this is me just kind of giving EA the benefit of the doubt, which is always a pretty bad gamble. But it feels like maybe the Battlefront 2 stuff, the controversy around the microtransactions, maybe we're seeing a little bit of that in Madden. Like, maybe they're trying to kind of apologize a little bit, because with the solo battles that they just introduced this year, it feels like people like me that refuse to pay any money for this game, for Madden Ultimate Team, it feels like you can upgrade your team at a quicker pace. Like, the solo battles, you're playing against a Madden Ultimate Team, like you're playing a full game, but you're actually playing it against the AI. So you don't actually have to play it online against another opponent, which is good for me, because my team just get curb stomped when I play actual people, because my team is never going to be as good as the teams that the people are willing to spend money on it. Like, you can literally on YouTube search for like $1,000 Madden Ultimate Team pull or whatever. Like, people spend ridiculous amounts of money on this game, and I'm just never going to compete with that. So I feel like they've kind of put in some stuff here and there in this game, especially in Madden Ultimate Team, that feel like, hey, you guys that refuse to spend money on this game, you can still compete. And the solo battles are kind of the perfect example of that. So I appreciate that. Franchise mode, they have done a few tweaks to it. I was pretty excited because they kind of teased that they were going to do a lot of changes for the franchise mode, and it was going to be a bigger part of this game. And I was a little bit disappointed initially because there wasn't as many changes as I thought there was going to be, but I do like some of the changes. Like aesthetically, they cleaned up franchise mode and they added a few things, but they also added the ability to import draft classes, because drafting has been kind of broken in Madden for the last couple of years. So they've given us the ability to kind of create our own draft classes, which, if you think about it, would take forever, and I'm never going to do that. But I think it's cool that they've added it. Plus, the Madden community is an awesome community. So there are already people that are doing that, and you can share your draft classes when you create them. So I just downloaded somebody else's, which is pretty awesome. So I like the fact that they did that. I do think that is kind of the classic EA Sports thing for them to do, because instead of fixing the mistake that they have had for the last couple of years, they're just like, you guys do it. We're not going to fix it. You fix it. And so I think that's kind of funny. It's kind of a classic EA thing for them to do, but I'm glad that it got fixed. So there's a few other things that I could go into, but like I said, I want to keep this shorter than the 25 minutes I went on in the actual Madden review. So if you want my full thoughts, just check that out. I think ultimately, if I remember correctly, I gave it 3.5 stars. And if they clean up some of the slider stuff and a few other things with the title updates, I think that it could easily be a 4-star game.
We really missed an opportunity here. You could have just said, I'm talking about Madden, and then we could have cut, and I could have pasted whenever you talked about Madden last year there, and nobody would have known the difference because it's the same fucking game every year.
Well, you weren't really paying attention then. No. Because
I'm kidding. I used to be one of the guys that bought Madden every year, and I definitely I'm just fucking with you because I get the people that buy it every year. For me, I just get bored with it quicker than, I mean, you play it all year, so you never get bored with it, but I usually get like a week or two out of it, and then I kind of move on. So that's why I stopped buying it every year. But for me, it's not even so much about like the features that they add every year when the game comes out. It's just about like getting updated rosters and those types of things.
Yeah, so I just now, within like the last month or two, stopped playing Madden 18. So I definitely get a ton of time and a ton of enjoyment out of these games, more than most. And I try not to talk about them as much on the podcast and the YouTube channel, because I understand like most of the people that listen to this podcast don't really care about sports games, and definitely the people on YouTube don't care. Like, I'm not an exclusive sports channel, like a sports gaming channel on YouTube. I play a bunch of different stuff, so a lot of my subs don't really particularly care about Madden, but I'm just like, hey, just stick with it for a week, because then I won't really talk about it too much after that. Like, I'm planning on streaming it every Sunday. We do Fortnite Fridays, and so I'm probably going to do the same thing with Madden, at least during the football season. That'll be my stream. But then my Tuesday and Wednesday will be whatever I'm playing. Like this coming week, I'm going to play We Happy Few that just came out on Friday. So I'm going to definitely be playing that, and I look forward to it because it looks like kind of like a BioShock type of game, which I love that game. So
what's it called?
I definitely get a little bit more enjoyment out of this. And I actually, last year, I think with Madden 18, I was like, maybe I should just make my channel a Madden channel because I play this game so much. But then I was like, no, I think I would get bored with it eventually.
What's the game called that you are going to stream on Wednesday?
We Happy Few.
Okay. So you definitely have an opportunity here for some branding. You got Fortnite Fridays, We Happy Few Wednesdays, Madden Mondays. Like, I'm basically writing this shit for you.
Well, I mean, you're also not listening to me because I didn't say I was going to play Madden on Mondays. I said I was.
You said Sundays. Yeah,
and I also said I was going to play We Happy Few on Tuesday and Wednesdays.
I'm just saying you have an opportunity here to move it to Mondays and make it Madden Mondays. Get shirts made, get bumper stickers.
Yeah, I'm not doing any of that.
Cool. Well, I can tell this is going well, so let's move on.
Oh, man. So, yeah, our next segment is just plainly called Comics. Tyler and I read a ton of comics each week, and we'd like to spotlight one or two. Well, we did it again. We did not text each other what comic we were going to read, and I blame Tyler for this week. So, I'm going to talk, we're both going to talk about the new Fantastic Four comic that just got put out this past week, and I think that Tyler has made it pretty clear to me, at least enough where I thought this going into this comic was he was not a fan of Fantastic Four, and I am. So I was like, I should probably text him. And then I thought, no, he's not a fan of Fantastic Four, so I don't have to text him because it's a Fantastic Four comic, and it's also written by Dan Slott, who he is not a fan of. So I don't have to worry about this week. Like, I got this. I'll talk about Fantastic Four, and we'll be good. Nope. Of course, he's going to talk about Fantastic Four, and we're just going to have to double up again this week. So, yeah. So we're just going to...
I felt that way, and I was going to make a comment that I felt like you blame me for this, and I
100% blame you. I feel like I made that pretty clear.
Dude, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. Like, the Leviathan thing, it happens, but, like... You can't take 10 seconds out of your day to send a text like, hey, don't read Fantastic Four.
Oh, I don't think that you have any right to tell me not to take 10 seconds out of my day to text you, because that's a little bit of an inside joke for everybody listening right now. I will text Tyler something on Monday, and I will be lucky if I hear a response by Wednesday.
In all fairness, it's usually because work is crazy. But also,
I'm sorry. I also have a job that I still text you right back.
I think we should keep this in the bedroom and not air out our dirty laundry for everybody.
No, I want to talk about this right now. No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that. But anyways, Fantastic Four. So
go ahead.
This is a big deal for Marvel because they've been away for a while, and this is a kind of a double issue, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. So there are two stories. And for each story, there are two writers, which of course just means that there's more opportunity for me to mispronounce people's names. There's also an artist for each story. The artist is different. So, in total, that is Dan Slott does both of them. So my math is not great. So that's 3. That's 5. I don't know why I didn't do the math before I started recording. But anyways, so there's 5 names that I'm going to probably mispronounce. Of course, Dan Slott, he helped write both of these stories. And the first person that helped him is a lady by Sarah Piccaelli. There's no way. And then Dan Slott and Scotty Young is the second writer on the second story. And then you have the artist Marty Garcia and Jeremy Trentz. So there you have it. And I was curious to see how they were going to bring them back. So we talked about this when the first most recent run ended. I think it was going into like Secret Wars, or maybe it was coming out of Secret Wars. And we kind of talked about the behind the scenes reason why they were getting rid of the Fantastic Four. And they kind of did this a little bit with the X-Men as well, is Disney and Marvel don't own the movie rights to these characters, and they kind of wanted to get them out of the spotlight, so to speak. And especially because the Fantastic Four, that Miles Teller Abomination movie was coming out soon, so they kind of got rid of the Fantastic Four for a while, and they focused mostly on the Inhumans, and that makes sense, I guess, from a marketing and business standpoint, but I hate the Inhumans, so I didn't really particularly care about that. They quickly became pretty boring to me, so I was definitely curious to see how they were going to bring the Fantastic Four back. And unfortunately, even though this is a double issue, they never really bring them back in this book. And that's the thing that really bugged me about this book after I was done reading it. And they even have like a little kind of joke at the end. I don't know if you read all the way through this, but they kind of have like a little joke at the very end about how like we've waited this long and they still don't bring them back at the end. And I'm just like, you can't acknowledge that you made a mistake and it forgives that mistake. Like, you still should have brought them back in this book. You had 40 fucking pages to do it and you still didn't bring them back. And the story itself was pretty boring. Let's be honest. Like, the Johnny Storm, Ben Grimes stuff, that felt natural just because they're always kind of been frenemies. And so I appreciate that storyline. And I do appreciate some of the stuff that happens with Ben. I won't spoil anything, but some of the Ben stuff is really good. But nothing really happens in this book. And that kind of bummed me out that we waited this long, to get to this book. And then the second story was just fucking weird. Like, it didn't even feel like it was part of this book. Like, I get why there was other writers and other artists on this story, because it didn't even feel like it was cohesive. So that was definitely disappointing. So all in all, I was pretty disappointed by this book.
Yeah, and I was too. I think for me, though, like, I was disappointed that it was kind of a shallow issue. Yeah. But I'm going to keep reading it in the long run, because I do kind of look forward to see what Dan Slott does with these characters. As much shit as I gave him about like his decade run on Amazing Spider-Man, like, anybody that writes a character for 10 years, like, cares. So I am excited to see what Dan Slott does, but this was like supposed to be a big event. Like, they've been leading up to it. They've been advertising it. They've been promising the return of the Fantastic Four for a few months now, and it just didn't pay off. It was basically a really small appetizer for what's to come, and that doesn't really sit right with me. So I was definitely disappointed. We often talk about comics blowing their load, and this comic definitely did not blow its load. It's definitely hanging on, but yeah, I mean, overall, pretty disappointing. There were some unnecessary tropes towards the end of the issue that I don't want to really get into because I don't want to spoil it. But overall, like you said, you really feel for Ben Grimm and for the Human Torch, because in this comic, they are basically going about their lives thinking that they've lost a big part of their family. And you don't want to see that happen to those characters. So, yeah, I mean, overall, I definitely agree with pretty much everything you said. I thought that the art was pretty good, at least the first story. What'd you say her name was? Sarah Pacelli?
I'm not going to try to say it again.
I'm pretty sure it's Sarah Pacelli. I thought that she did really good, so I'm excited to see her to continue to write the characters. I do think that the PS story at the end with you didn't really allude to what happened, so I don't know if you considered it a spoiler or not, but it had to do with, I'm just going to say it had to do with Doctor Doom. And
I wasn't keeping it a secret. It wasn't interesting to me, so I just didn't feel like the need to mention it.
So the only reason that it was interesting to me is because I talked about Infamous Iron Man a few times on the podcast whenever that was a thing. And when Infamous Iron Man ended, unless I've missed something somewhere because I didn't keep up with the new Tony Stark Iron Man comic, Doctor Doom still considers himself a good guy. And that's how that comic kind of ended. So with the Fantastic Four coming back, you imagine you also need Doctor Doom to come back as a villain, and there's no real explanation why. Also, they made a huge deal in Secret Wars, like when Doctor Doom takes his mask off, he's only slightly deformed, like he has like a thing on his lip, and that just shows like how vain he is. And then this book kind of alludes to under the mask, he's really deformed. You can kind of see it in the shadows of what's drawn. So there's just some inconsistency there that didn't sit right with me. And I get it. Like, it's comic books, and while continuity is important, like, you kind of always reset every once in a while. But I still would appreciate if those past stories were kind of wrapped up and explained before you kind of lead into something like this.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I do want to mention real quick, it has nothing to really do with this particular comic. I did like the kind of like tribute to Steve Ditko. I thought that was pretty cool. I definitely appreciated that. I haven't read a ton of Marvel recently, and I'm still trying to get caught up on Amazing Spider-Man. That's really kind of, that and Star Wars are really the only two Marvel books that I've been keeping up with after I cut a lot of stuff out. So I'm behind on both of them, so I don't know if they've been doing this with all of their comics, but I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember there being anything in Amazing Spider-Man 2, but I picked up Amazing Spider-Man 3 this week, so I'll let you know if there's anything in there. I'm sure there is. There's got to be, with how prolific he was with that character.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool, man. You ready for nerd news?
Yeah, what do you got this week?
So, a few different stories. The first is that the villain of the Birds of Prey movie wasn't really announced, but it was kind of confirmed by the Wrap. It's going to be Black Mask, who of course is a pretty big Batman villain, but it's also a Batman villain we've not seen on screen yet. So I didn't know a ton about this character until the Arkham games. He kind of is in the background of Arkham City, and I want to say he pops up in Arkham Knight if I remember correctly, but I thought
he was Arkham Origins too.
Oh yeah. That's what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of Arkham Origins. You're right. I forgot that game even existed.
Yeah, pretty much.
No, but I think he's a pretty cool character. I don't know how he fits into a movie like Birds of Prey, but I appreciate that they're giving another of the Rogues Gallery kind of a shot at live action.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think he's definitely a villain because if we don't know that much about him, there's not going to be a ton of people that know a bunch about him. So I think it's interesting that they're giving a villain essentially kind of a clean slate, so to speak. I don't know if there's going to be a ton of people that are like, oh my God, Black Mask is going to be in this movie. You need this, this, and this. Like, I think they can kind of go into it with their own creative clean slate, so to speak, and really make a really cool villain.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a great point. So I'm excited for that. Absolutely. I'm glad that at one point it was rumored to be the Penguin, and I don't know that would have made a ton of sense, especially since we've seen plenty of the Penguin over the last couple decades. So yeah, I'm excited to see Black Mask. There's another DC story, but I'm going to hold off on that till the end because it's a good segue to our main topic. So it was announced this week that Samuel L. Jackson and Kobe Smulders will be in Spider-Man Far From Home, which is currently filming. I don't know how, considering they turned to dust at the end of Infinity War, but
yeah, so did Peter Parker. So I mean,
good point.
Maybe that's where Spider-Man's gonna be. Like that's where they're gonna be. That's where they went.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that part of the theory? Like they're gone to some multiverse, and that's how they're gonna bring in multiverse into the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I think that's a pretty good theory. I mean, I've heard the theory that they're all in the Soul Stone as well. Yeah. So who knows? I think the multiverse thing's cool. I would really like to see something Secret War related. Like, you know, they're all transported to a different planet or something, but I doubt it. It's probably going to be a little bit more straightforward than that.
Yeah, for sure.
So this next one was a weird one. I was not expecting this, but you and I both watch the Oscars every year, and while we don't put a ton of stock into it, it is something that we talk about on the podcast every year, and they announced a new category for film this year, and it's popular film. So there will be Best Popular Film in the 2019 Oscar ceremony that is presented, and they didn't really announce much more than that, but you'd imagine that this is their way to recognize movies like Avengers Infinity War. But it's gotten a lot of backlash, and I'm not a fan of it either. If you're saying that Avengers Infinity War deserves an Oscar, and I'm just using that as an example, of course, but if you're saying a movie like that deserves an Oscar, so we're going to create a separate category for movies like that, wouldn't you just put that into the Best Picture? Who's to say that a movie's more artistic, so it deserves Best Picture, but these other shitty popcorn movies deserve their own category called popular film? It just doesn't sit right.
So I've talked a lot about how I don't respect the Oscars like I used to. So I think if they had done this like 5 years ago, I would have scoffed at it and would have been really pissed because I'd be like, that's not the point of the Oscars. Like, you're either good enough to make to be nominated for a Best Picture or you're not. Like, the idea of the Oscars were like the more artistic movies. That was the point. Like, the Golden Globes have the comedy and musical, and so you get different types of movies that get nominated for that. But, like, I just think of the Oscars or at least I did think of the Oscars in kind of a different category, and it would have probably upset me a lot more 5 years ago, but now I don't think of the Oscars like that anymore, so who cares? Like, okay, they're going to put it in a popular movie category. I still think it's stupid because, it's stupid for a couple of different reasons. And I think a lot of people are upset, I think most notably, especially this year, because of Black Panther. Because obviously a lot of people love that movie and I'm included in that. And a lot of people were clamoring for that to be nominated for the Oscars. And they feel like this is a cop-out from the Academy because now they're just going to put Black Panther into the popular category, and that's going to be their excuse for leaving it out of Best Picture, so they don't have to have that controversy of why Black Panther didn't make it into the Best Picture race. So there's that, but I think ultimately, it's stupid. It's stupid in a couple of different ways. Like, first of all, if you're thinking about popular, like, are you just strictly going by box office? Are you doing trending? Like people talking about it on social media? Like, what is your qualifications for popular? Because if you're just going by box office, which it would be the easiest way to do that, like, these movies have already won. Like, they won a ton of money. So I don't know if they necessarily need another category. Plus, if you're going by box office, that's how you're going to nominate these movies. Are you just going to give whoever made the most money the award? Or is it going to be like, this is the best of the bunch? Like, artistically, this is the best of the bunch. So I don't know. It's just a stupid, like, desperate move. That's all it feels like, is just a desperate move to get people to watch the Oscars.
Yeah, you said it. Like, you've kind of lost respect for the Oscars over the last few years, and I think that I'm in a similar boat to that. And here they are trying to do something to get more viewers, but at the end of the day, they're just losing more respect. Like, they're pandering at this point, which is fucking silly. So I think you made a good point with Black Panther. I went the Avengers Infinity War route, but I think Black Panther might actually be one of the factors that kind of pushed them into doing this, because a lot of people talked when that movie came out, like, will there be Oscar buzz about this film because it's important from like a race standpoint? And this is kind of their response to that, which seems silly.
Yeah, for sure. And I really doubt that Black Panther is going to get a Best Picture nod.
No, especially now that there's a popular film category. It doesn't make sense. So anyways, two more stories. So last night, or maybe Friday night, it came out that the Chris's have walked away from the next Star Trek movie. So Chris Pine and Chris Hemsworth were both going to be in this next film. Chris Hemsworth, of course, played Kirk's dad in the original J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie from about a decade ago, and he was going to be brought back in some kind of time travel manner, I guess. But yeah, they both walked away because they said that salary negotiations are not going well. I guess the movie's budget got cut because Star Trek Beyond didn't make as much money as the prior two movies, and they were going to have to take pay cuts from what it sounds like. So they both bounced.
Yeah, so I'm not too terribly upset. I had forgotten that this movie was even going to happen. Like, I enjoy the Star Trek movies, don't get me wrong, but I'm definitely not a Trekkie by any means. So it's like, it's not something that really upsets me too much. Like, I was pleasantly surprised at how much I like the Star Trek movies. And I would have loved to see another one. Don't get me wrong, but if it never happens again, it's not like I'm going to be super disappointed. Plus, it sounds like we're still going to get the Quentin Tarantino Star Trek movie anyways, so we'll see if that still happens.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like there's an easy solution to this. Like, nobody wants to see fucking Chris Hemsworth show up as Kirk's dad and be the same age as Kirk and all of that kind of nonsense. So why not just, like, say, okay, Chris Hemsworth, go do Men in Black, that's fine, and then just give that money to Chris Pine and make the fucking movie with the core cast.
I think your answer is what you were saying earlier, with the fact that the latest one didn't do as well, and Chris Hemsworth is this huge star. Like, nobody knew who fucking Chris Hemsworth was when the first Star Trek movie came out. Literally, that was the first time I'd ever seen him in a movie, was a Star Trek. And then he got cast as Thor, and they're like, oh yeah, it's this guy from Star Trek. And I'm like, what? Like, I didn't remember who he was. And then that guy that was in the Star Trek movie for like a minute gets Thor. And I was like, oh, that's actually, I mean, he kind of looks the part. And then of course the Thor movies come out and they're not great, but I mean, he's awesome in the movie. So he's just another caliber of star now. And so I feel like that's the answer. That's why they want him in this movie, they have this awesome star in their universe. They might as well bring him in at this point.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's definitely the reasoning. But wouldn't a movie without him be better than a movie not happening, I guess? But seeing as I think Star Trek Beyond made like half of what Into Darkness made, so I guess the studio's nervous and maybe they should be. So I don't know. When those movies came out, Star Wars wasn't really back yet. And then by the time Star Trek Beyond came out, Star Wars was back. I keep getting Trek and Wars mixed up, but I think people are more focused on Star Wars right now.
For sure.
Like they've always been, because it's superior to Star Trek. All right, last story, because like I said, it's kind of a segue to our main topic. So Ruby Rose was cast as Batwoman, which was a pretty quick turnaround. So we just talked about how that was announced at Comic-Con a week or two ago, and now they've cast it. So the Batwoman character will be played by Ruby Rose, who is a lesbian, and that character is a lesbian. So they're kind of sticking to that from the comics. But I've seen some interviews with her where she seems pretty stoked to be playing the part. So that's good from her. We will get into a performance section in the Meg.
We will.
About the performances. Of course, the segue I'm alluding to is that Ruby Rose is in the Meg. Let's just hope that she works on covering up that Australian accent a little bit more, because there were some parts in the Meg that were a little brutal with her accent slipping through. So we'll see.
Is Ruby Rose her, like, given name? Like, is it on her birth certificate? Because it sounds like a porno name.
It does. I don't know. I have no idea what her real name is, or if that is her real name.
But I actually tweeted this out, and you may have seen it already, Tyler, but I don't know. I don't know if I can necessarily say that I'm excited. I think it's a cool casting, for sure.
Yeah,
and
I mean, she's kind of a name. I mean, I didn't expect them to get... I felt like they would go with somebody unknown, and say what you will about her, but she's been in some stuff. Like, she was in Orange is the New Black. She was in, like, the Pitch Perfect movie. She was in John Wick 2. She's in the Meg. Like, she's done stuff, and now she's going to do an episodic television series. So I felt like that was a pretty cool get for them. So I'm excited for this show. Like, I'll watch it, but I just hope that her acting can improve a little.
Yeah, I know her mostly from John Wick 2, and I actually thought she was really good in that. And, of course, we're going to get into how she is in the Meg. But I think, I don't remember exactly how I phrased it, but, like, I still don't care about the character. Like, I'm not that into the character. I think it's cool that they got this person for this character, but it still doesn't make me care about this character, and I'm still not going to watch the show.
I'm surprised you're not going to at least give it a shot, since you're a big Flash guy.
I don't really I tried Arrow. I didn't like it. I couldn't even get through the first season. I do really like Flash, but I have not watched Supergirl. I have not watched Legends of Tomorrow. So it's not like I'm huge into Arrowverse. I might watch this show, but I mean, it would have to be like a day like there's absolutely nothing else going on.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So cool, man. Well, that is my segue for you to the Meg.
All right, so like we've been saying, we're going to be reviewing The Meg, which was directed by John Turteltaub, which, again, I'm not sure if that is his given name or not. If this was your stage name, dude, you need to pick a different one because that's a stupid fucking name. But I apologize if that was your actual given name. Anyways, he is most known for his National Treasure movies, and he also did the classic. I don't know if you've ever seen this movie before, Tyler, but you need to watch this movie. He did the classic Three Ninjas movie, just the first one. Have you seen Three Ninjas before?
When I was really young, I saw it. He's been around that long.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he does mostly garbage, but Three Ninjas is really good. I haven't watched that movie in a long time, but I remember loving it as a kid. It's like if Home Alone happened and Kevin was a fucking ninja. That's what that movie is, and it's pretty awesome. I mean, it's super, super cheesy, but also amazing. So he did that movie, and The Meg is about... How do I describe this movie? So basically, after a scientific expedition goes horribly wrong, the scientists must confront a prehistoric monster shark before it feeds on a beach full of people. So I have to admit, when I first saw or heard about this movie, I thought it looked pretty stupid. But I am a fan of movies like Snakes on a Plane. I briefly owned, because I blind bought it, but I was kind of disappointed in it. Sharktopus is what that movie's called. So I am a fan of like those stupid, like fun, cheesy movies. And so the more I saw some of these trailers for this movie and some of the promotional material, I felt like The Meg could be one of those movies. Like it could be the next Snakes on a Plane, because I thought Snakes on a Plane looked stupid, and then I was just hearing a lot of good things coming out when it first was released, that it's just fun and silly and knows what it is, and those movies can be really, really fun. And not every movie has to be like this high art thing. You can still get enjoyment out of just these fun, campy movies. And so I was hoping The Meg would be my next Snakes on a Plane.
Yeah, I briefly had that same thought until the trailer started coming out. I don't know, man. I was not looking forward to this movie. I did not hide my feelings from you that I was not looking forward to having to watch and review this movie, but we do it for the podcast, right? So, yeah, I wasn't excited, but there was that glimmer of hope, because I do like monster movies. I do like shark movies when they're done well. So I was holding out a bit of hope for this one.
For sure. And if this is your first episode, we break up the main topic, these big reviews that we do at the end of each episode, into segments. Like we break up the podcast episodes into segments. And the first segment that we do is just kind of a general overview of whatever we're reviewing. We call it broad strokes. So how'd you feel about The Meg?
So this will probably be the most positive thing I say about The Meg. It's a pile of garbage, but it's not the worst movie I saw this year. So I wouldn't say this movie takes itself too seriously, but it definitely doesn't play off the irony of this concept enough, in my opinion, for it to have been a lot of fun. Creature features are great because they're cheesy and they're gory and they're funny, and this movie was none of those. So it just kind of fell flat. I mean, that being said, like, you know, it wasn't the worst thing I saw all year. Like there were moments that were fun, and there were moments that were cool. Like I'll speak more to that when we get to action a little bit later. But overall, it's very, very forgettable.
Yeah, so I've already mentioned Snakes on a Plane once. With that movie, like it does explain some plot points at the beginning of the movie, but for the most part, most of that movie, and the reason why it's fun, is just it's so ridiculous, and a lot of that movie is just Samuel L. yelling about snakes being on a motherfucking plane, and that's what makes that movie so much fun. If you can just turn your brain off and just enjoy this stupidity of this whole thing. The Meg spends way too much time explaining stuff. Like, it definitely has that comic book science feel to it. And it really bugs the shit out of me, because it's a monster shark movie, and we have the transporter in it. Like, just have the transporter fight the giant shark and be done. Like, it wants to be high art. It felt like The Meg felt like it was too good for Sharktopus. Like, that's what this movie is. Like, I mean, obviously it's not as ridiculous as that movie is, but it wanted to be high art compared to those types of movies. And I just don't feel like it, I mean, first of all, it wasn't, it strived to be that, and it wasn't even close to that. But also that's not what I wanted this movie to be. And I don't know if there was anybody out there that wanted it to be the Dark Knight of shark movies. So, to use a phrase that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, but like, I talked about this last week with Christopher Robin. Like, I felt really old watching that movie because I agreed with a lot of the things that Christopher Robin did. And in this week, I felt like a true Hooser. I couldn't even think of the fucking name of the state that I live in. I felt like every time that they talked about science, I rolled my eyes in this movie. All right. So the next segment that we always talk about, in our reviews is the story. So how'd you feel about the Meg? I can't even say the story of the Meg without laughing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with most of what you said in broad strokes. They definitely tried their hardest to give this movie some weight in the story department, but it all just fell flat. Like, I didn't go into this movie expecting Shakespeare, but I really found myself not caring much and rooting for the shark part of the time because the story surrounding the shark was so bad. If the visuals were just a little worse, then this would have felt like a Sci-Fi Channel movie, especially with all of the movie science that is in this film. It's like you said, man, like they spend a lot of time talking about like, oh, maybe that's not the bottom of the ocean and what's below it and the temperature of the water and this and that, when they could have just said something along the lines of, the ocean's a really big place and we haven't really explored it. And there's a big ass shark down there somewhere. Like that, they could have just gone that route and probably cut like 20 minutes to half hour off of this movie because it's also very long, which did not play in its favor. So it's rare that I say a movie would have been better off being stupider, but that is definitely the case of the Meg. If it hadn't taken itself so seriously all of a sudden, it would have been a little bit more forgivable, and I would have maybe had a little bit more fun with it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think I knew immediately that this movie wasn't what I wanted it to be, because you start off this movie and they really try hard to give Jason Statham's character a backstory, and I just really did not care. Like, immediately I was like, fuck, this movie is going to take itself way too seriously. And then, of course, it did. And it definitely has that small world problem that I talk about sometimes when we talk about movies. Like, Jonas, who is Jason Statham's character, ex-wife, just so happens to be one of the divers that gets trapped when they first go down to explore this area that they ultimately find the Meg in. So of course that's the reason that they get Jason Statham to essentially come out of retirement. And so that was really stupid, and just a really stupid like movie trope that they used. And then of course that led to like this really weird forced like love triangle thing, which I don't know if you've ever seen Speed 2, Tyler, but there was something in this movie that just kept reminding me of that silly Speed 2 movie. So Sandra Bullock's in Speed 2, but Keanu Reeves isn't, and they make some like stupid excuse, and actually kind of is one of the few things that I like about Speed 2 is that she basically mentions that her and Keanu Reeves' character in Speed don't really work out because their relationship started on this really crazy thing that is never going to happen to them again, and you just can't sustain that energy. And I kept thinking that during these stupid like love triangle scenes is like, once they get past this, like, what is their relationship going to be like? Because you can't have a giant shark every weekend. Like, how are you going to follow that up? Are you just going to go on like boring picnics together? Like, you can't follow that up. You fought a giant shark together. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking way too hard about the Meg.
I think you make a good point, man. Like, they don't know anything about each other in this movie except they both want to kill this fucking shark.
Yeah.
And now they're going to go, I don't want to spoil the end of the movie, but they talk about going on vacation together or whatever. Like, that's probably not going to go great.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know this fucking guy. He was a drunk not 30 minutes ago, and you're going to basically let him be your daughter's new daddy? Like, what the fuck? You don't know this person. It was really weird and really, really forced. And, the father and daughter stuff didn't really work for me at all. And I'll talk about why it didn't work for me in performances, but I think you can probably just tell by the way I said that, why I don't think that it really works. And another thing that really bothered me the more I watched this movie was, can we talk about how stupid it is that they kept getting on boats? Like every time, like, let's fight this giant shark. Okay, let's get on a boat. Like, what the fuck? Why are you gonna get on? It just didn't, it made zero sense to me. It seemed like the worst kind of idea. Like, literally, they find out that the shark destroyed a boat while they're on a boat, and they're just like, okay, we're cool. Like, he just destroyed this other boat. Like, Get the fuck away from it. Like, that really bugged me. I will say that the Jaws references were too on the nose for me. Like, but by the time they had, like, I wanted Jaws references, because obviously that's kind of what this movie is, and there's some Deep Blue Sea stuff as well in this movie. So I was hoping that they would have a little bit more of that, but then once we got to it, it just was way too on the nose for me, and I just wasn't having fun by the time we got to it, so it wasn't like I really cared that much about it. I will say that, there's a moment where you think the shark is going to eat a dog, and we've talked about this before, we're big dog people, and I didn't care about this movie at that point, and I would have left. I literally, in my mind, I was like, I'm gonna walk out. If this shark eats his dog, I'm gonna fucking walk out. And I'm just gonna say, fuck the review. I'm walking out of this movie. They kind of lead you to believe that the shark eats the dog, but I don't care if this is a spoiler or not, but it didn't eat the dog. So I didn't have to walk out. But they kind of, for like a second. There. I'm sorry, what?
I was just saying I was the same way. I was like, you're gonna, not only do I have to sit through this movie, but I have to watch this little fucking dog get eaten. I'm done.
Yeah.
So that was nice.
It kind of just, for me, you can't be both. You can't be a serious, like, high art movie and be a monster shark movie. Like, you need to pick one or the other. And one thing that I think really hurt this movie, among other things, and the more I hear about it, like, I know that Jason Statham has said something about this, and I think the director has well, like, the PG-13 rating has really hurt this movie, and it feels like some of the editing choices to get down to the PG-13 rating, because there were a few moments in this movie that I'm just like, that was a weird cut, or that was a weird thing. Like, it didn't fit the movie, and I wonder if they came back and reshot some stuff and added some stuff, because there was just some weird scenes with Jason Statham, like, laughing after, like, these certain scenes with the shark, and it just didn't feel like it felt like it was cohesive. And so I wonder if they edited some stuff and reshot some stuff to get it down to that PG-13 rating. I just felt like we needed more dumb. Like, this movie is super dumb, don't get me wrong, but we needed more dumb. Like, this is the dumbest, most serious movie I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
All right, so let's get to performances. How'd you feel about the Meg?
I mean, it was pretty garbage. I mean, there was not much good in the performances. Like, Jason Statham was not bad, but he's just Jason Statham. Like, he has one setting, and he used that setting in this movie, so it was fine. I already kind of said my piece on Ruby Rose when we were talking in Nerd News. There were just a lot of places. I don't know why they didn't just make her Australian. Like, why did she have to be American? Like, there's no plot point that means that she has to be American, so she could have just used her normal accent and been fine, but instead they try to cover it up, and it seeps out a lot in one scene in particular, so I didn't really get that. Paige Kennedy plays the character DJ. I thought he was horrible and annoying. Honestly, I don't know where you're going to go with this. I would say the best actor/actress in this movie was the little girl.
I thought she was creepy. I didn't like her. No, and it wasn't necessarily about her performance. It was no 8-year-old girl acts like her.
Well, it was pretty irresponsible to even have her in that environment.
Absolutely. And once the giant shark shows up, get her the fuck out of there.
You know where she'd be safe? The land. Not on this.
For sure.
So that situation would be 100% taken care of. So, I mean, besides the giant plot hole there, like I thought she was fine. Same with the actress that played as her mom. I'm not even going to try Bing Bing Lee. Like she was fine. Like there was a lot of fine and a lot of bad, but no great. So, I mean, it is a movie based on a prehistoric shark. So I don't know that I was expecting anything too crazy, but yeah, I mean, pretty disappointing overall.
I will disagree with you. I thought Lee was really bad. I felt her acting felt really stiff. She had no chemistry with Jason Statham whatsoever. And so that love triangle, which was even harder to believe to begin with from what I was saying earlier, but just her acting, it's hard when you are a worse actor than Jason Statham, you're a really bad actor. Like when he is outshining you, you may just need to think of a new career choice because he was the best actor in this movie by a long shot. I will say, I mean, I love Rainn Wilson because The Office is quickly becoming one of my favorite shows of all time, and he has created by far one of my favorite characters of all time in Dwight Schrute. So I love him as an actor. He wasn't good in this movie, but I don't think it was even his fault. Like, it felt like he was in a different movie. It felt like he was in the movie that I wanted the Meg to be. Like, his character is so silly and stupid. And I was like, man, I wish that everything about this movie was what Rainn Wilson was bringing to this movie. Like, it felt like he signed on for the movie that I wanted the Meg to be. And that leads me to think again that there was some editing choices and some reshots, because I doubt that an actor like that is going to bring that silly, stupid character to the screen without the understanding that that's what this movie was going to be. So I'm definitely curious to hear some more back behind the scenes kind of stories. So we kind of talked about this a little bit before, like off recording a few weeks ago. Like, again, we wanted this movie to be silly, and we were both kind of talking about, like, can Jason Statham even do that? And I think he can. I definitely think that he has that in his arsenal. I mean, he did that in Spy. I mean, granted, he was working with a lot better cast than he was working with in this movie, but like he definitely has that track record of being self-aware and being able to make fun of himself because he did it in Spy. I just don't think he was asked to do it in this movie. So he was just Jason Statham in this movie, and that's fine. I didn't like it because, again, I'm beating a dead horse, but that's not what I wanted this movie to be. So I kind of just wish it was the Rainn Wilson version of the Meg that I got to see his character do. I kind of wish, and I agree with what you said about the actor playing DJ. I just kind of wish that they had just gotten LL Cool J just to complete the Deep Blue Sea thing. Like, I feel like that would have been like a really self-aware, like, wink and nod to the fact that this is basically Deep Blue Sea with a little bit of Jaws mixed in. So I thought that would be kind of cool. I mean, LL Cool J's not really doing anything. I mean, he does that stupid CSI. Is that show even on anymore?
I have no idea. He's also the host of Lip Sync Battle.
Yeah, but come on. I mean, do you really have to really host that? I always thought that it would be funny if they just had him like, and this has nothing to do with the Meg, but I always thought that it would be kind of funny if they had him host and like had somebody dub over his voice in that show just because it's lip sync. I thought that would be kind of funny. Anyways, don't steal my idea, Jimmy Fallon. Don't steal my idea. But anyways, I always thought it would be fun if they had LL Cool J. But yeah, I just didn't think that the father-daughter thing worked because I didn't think either one of those actors were very good. They were both really stiff and awkward, and it just didn't work for me.
Oh, for sure. I agree.
All right, so you had mentioned the action earlier, so I'm definitely curious to hear what you have to say about it.
I think it comes back to, I was kind of holding off on this point for action, but at the end of the day, they played it safe and made this movie PG-13 and made it a cheesy PG-13 horror movie. But by making it PG-13, the story and the action becomes a lot more generic, and you can't lean on the gore and the violence to make up for your shitty story like a lot of horror movies sometimes do. So the action for me was very disappointing. Like, you know, the climax of this movie you see in the trailer is when the Meg is near the shore and there's all of these people swimming, and there's a lot you could do from that standpoint, from like an action and from a horror and from a gore standpoint, but instead, like nothing really happens. Like when the shark eats somebody, it doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't feel real, but it doesn't feel like anything actually happened because there's such a lack of showing it because you're going for that PG-13 rating. So, I thought that the action was pretty flat. There was a couple points in the climax whenever they're trying to kill the Meg, where, I forget the character's name, but Jonas and then the female character, his love interest, are in the boats, that I thought were pretty cool. And I don't want to spoil like the very end of the movie, but they did go pretty over the top with how Jason Statham saves the day, which I really appreciated because it was fucking ridiculous. But at the end of the day, like most of the action was pretty generic and flat.
Yeah, I think that was, I wouldn't say the most disappointing, because again, the movie taking itself too seriously was the most disappointing aspect of this movie. But I don't know, it's hard because like you said, like the shark eating the people was kind of disappointing, but it's like a 70-foot shark and they're eating a little person. Like, how are you going to make that interesting and gory? Because I mean, it would just, that's the thing that really bugged me. I kept thinking is like, why would the shark keep surfacing for like little people? Like, we'd be like a little tiny snack for him. So I don't understand that. There was a moment in this movie, and I won't spoil it, even though obviously we're not suggesting you go see this movie, that I knew what they were going to try to do, but I didn't know it was going to go the route that it went. Because they're on this boat and they kind of have a Jaws moment. And there was a pretty cool moment from that part that I liked. And I know I'm being super vague and I'm doing that on purpose. But there was a moment where I was like, oh, that's kind of a cool little twist. It doesn't really have too much to do with the action. I knew that something was going to happen. I just didn't think that what happened was going to be the thing that I was going to see. So that was pretty cool. The Jason Statham stuff at the end was, I mean, utterly ridiculous, but it was probably the most fun this movie had. So yeah, I would have actually, there's a moment in the trailer where you get to see the Meg kind of carry away a squid, and I kind of wish that moment would have been a bigger deal. Maybe if we didn't see it in the trailers, or maybe they made it a bigger deal. But I wonder if they were trying to like show the power of the Meg. Like it just easily dispatched this giant squid, but I thought that would be kind of a cool like showdown. But that wouldn't have gone with what the movie was trying to do, which was be the fucking Dark Knight of shark movies.
Yeah.
All right, so star rating out of 5 stars, The Meg. What'd you think?
2.
Yeah, me too. Let's be done with this movie.
Yeah, not great. So, all right, so we'll move on to nerd favorite then. I think that nerd favorite might be a little obvious and on the nose, but it is what it is. So I just want to know what your favorite shark movie is that is not Jaws, because I would imagine if we just said favorite shark movie, we'd both say Jaws. So mine is Deep Blue Sea, because I am a child of the 90s and I stand by that movie not being terrible. There's a couple places in that movie that still like I think of when I think of big movie moments, and one is Samuel L. Jackson's character's death. Like that's, I don't want to
spoiler alert.
Iconic is a strong word, so I don't want to say iconic, but I just loved that beat. Like he gives this huge motivational speech, and he's probably the biggest actor in that movie at that time, and then he dies out of nowhere. The shark comes up from behind and gets him. Like I just love that moment. And then I love pieces of that movie that almost feel like it's a slasher movie with sharks, like the LL Cool J spot where he is in the kitchen and he ends up like getting the shark to swim into the oven, like all of that kind of stuff. And like where he's in the oven trying to avoid the shark, like all of that stuff feels great. Like I said, it feels like a slasher movie almost. So sure, it's cheesy. Sure, it's not great. And I haven't seen it in a while, so I'm sure it doesn't hold up. But for me, it's for sure Deep Blue Sea. Just I remember watching that movie in like grade school and loving it.
Can I choose Jaws, the Revenge, or whatever that movie is called? No, that movie's fucking stupid.
I've not seen any of the Jaws movies except for the original. So
really, you've never? I've seen all of them. I've seen all of them.
I've heard they're all bad.
The last one is ridiculously bad. It's like the shark goes out of its way to find the Brodies. Is that what their last name is? Yeah, they're Brodies. Yeah. They like go, he goes out of his way to find them. And it's so weird. And they kind of like infer like he has a psychic link with the Brody. It's fucking weird, dude. It's really weird. And, yeah, it's really stupid. Don't go see that movie. But, yeah, I was just kidding. I'm obviously not going to pick that movie. Deep Blue Sea is probably the most obvious choice because I do like that movie. It is kind of what I wanted the Meg to be, which is I don't think that movie takes itself too seriously. It's not quite like cheesy or like Sharknado or anything like that, but it is pretty silly. So they basically just made a shark like super smart. And it is kind of definitely has a lot of cheesy moments in it. But yeah, Deep Blue Sea is a good one. I don't know if it would necessarily be my choice. It was kind of the thing that jumped out at me when you first asked me this question. But the more I thought about it, the more I think The Shallows is probably the best non-Jaws shark movie. I just really appreciate that. I'm not a big Blake Lively fan, but I thought she did a really good job in that movie. I kind of wanted 47 Meters Down to be The Shallows, and that movie's garbage. And so I really appreciate that. I think a lot of people would say Open Water, but I really just didn't care for that movie. I know a lot of people love that movie, and I think a lot of people like it for how, like, small budget it is, but I really I didn't care for that movie. I definitely think it's The Shallows for sure.
Yeah, I forgot about The Shallows. That movie is pretty good as well. And then Open Water, the thing that doesn't sit right with me about Open Water is they say based on a true story, but the true story is that they just forgot a couple scuba divers and they couldn't find them. So they're inferring that they got eaten by sharks, which is really, really loosely based. So I never really got into that movie.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that's it for another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast. As always, we'd really appreciate if you subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes. That really, really helps us out. I mean, obviously, the TV and film review genre podcast is very saturated. So anything that helps us kind of get separated from the pack, we really appreciate that. Of course, you can do all of those things on Stitcher Radio, and basically any good podcatcher you use, we're on it. You can check out our website, thenerdspodcast.com, which is kind of just the hub for everything that we do. We have blog entries occasionally. We don't do them as much as we probably should. You also have like the show notes for every episode. You have the Rotten Tomatoes film draft. You have my gaming journal and so on and so forth. So definitely check that out. You can check out both of our Letterboxd feeds on Letterboxd, obviously, if you use that app, or just letterboxd.com. My username is @TheNerdsPodcast. You can follow Tyler at that Tyler Hunt. You can also check out our YouTube channel, comment and subscribe, The Nerds You're Looking For. And then you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. They're both @TheNerdsPodcast. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Google+. And then finally, you can email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt,
we are The Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.